Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. He and I are going to be covering a topic, but here at the top, I think that Kevin wanted to mention something about recent content on the channel. So take it away, Kev.
Yeah, like to bring this back in because there's a lot of content that is really good stuff that people might overlook. So I just want to make sure it got highlighted. But you had a very recent video about an essential tone mod for guitars, which after watching your demonstration of it, I have to agree. The passive treble bass controls that you modded a Strat with, I know you've talked about that before, but seeing that demonstrated out pickup by pickup on the Strat really knocked me out. And especially the bass cut capabilities. That was a real eye opener for me because just a bit of bass cut on the neck pickup. And I was like, that's how I want a neck pickup to sound on a Strat. It was just, it just, leapt out of the guitar. And I really loved the way it kind of cleaned things up and gave it a brightness that it wouldn't otherwise have. And even all the way across to the bridge pickup, every pickup to me, just the range of capabilities you had with those controls put in place it just knocked me out. And so I'm going to have to, it makes me want to, go get a stock Strat just so I can have two tone controls and mess around with that. But, I really like the on-screen diagrams you had too, with the arrow moving from section to section that you were working on. I think that makes it super approachable for anyone to tackle. But yeah, I'm a believer after that. Big change, and not just the range of controls, but the range of really usable, interesting sounds. I thought was a big upgrade after that. So, so you did promise in that video to not talk about it anymore after that, but I wanted to talk about it just a little bit more. And I've got my old Strat. I think I've mentioned before, it's a Strat special of some kind. It was made for just a couple years in the 90s, and it's got the stock humbucker and a coil tap switch, for the bridge humbucker, and it's got a single tone control. So I don't have the immediate capability to do that same kind of mod with the two separate tone controls. But this one's got a TBX tone control, which gives a little bit of extra something. It's not nearly as pronounced as the passive treble bass, but it's basically the way I understand it, it's basically a normal tone control for the first half of the rotation, and then after that it cuts resistance, so it affects more like a presence control almost, just kind of sort of having that effect on the sound, which I like, but it's not nearly as pronounced. And so I've read you can do a little mod to the TBX control. I think it's maybe just like removing a resistor and adding a capacitor to increase the degree of bass cut available, and even adjust the frequency where that happens. And so seeing how the tones came alive on the Strat with your increased range of tonal control, I may have to give that a shot on the TBX because it looks comparably simple to do. But it's a good reminder of how just a little bit of soldering, a little bit of, just flip it open, tweak a couple things, and you've got a fully different awakened instrument with new possibilities.
Absolutely, and that's why I've covered it, and that's why I kind of wanted to make a end cap video. The video, I just wanted to demonstrate doing it in real time, just to show how quick it is to do. And going through just very meticulously about how powerful that circuit is. It sounds like you've got a standalone video of your own to put on the channel. Then, if you do that mod, make sure that if you do decide to do it, record the guitar, record yourself playing it before and after. And then I've got a TBX tone control that I could mod the exact same way, and we could kind of like, do a collab on that. So that could be cool.
That sounds good.
Because I'm dissatisfied with my TBX tone control that I put on one of my guitars. So, yeah. But anyway, it's just a huge difference. It makes the instrument completely versatile in any environment. And, the bass cut is just magic. So, what I really like is that when you do it on the bridge, it gives you that telly sound. I mean, all of a sudden, it sounds like a telly. Yep. So,
love that.
Which is super cool. All right, well, let's jump into the topic then. Today's topic is, the creative process. Obviously, Kevin and I are both, we make music, I make videos. We have all sorts of creative outlets. And I wanted to talk about the creative process in and to invite others into the conversation to discuss what is the hardest part of the creative process for you. I want to discuss real briefly my toughest part, and then we'll have Kevin go. Kevin may be surprised by what mine is, but I think this is something that everybody needs to talk about. You know, with the rise of so much canned content and things, canned music that's just, you know, very by the numbers. Actually trying to break out of that and be creative on your own, just let your own imagination run wild, can be daunting to try to come up with things. I mean, every week I have to come up with, you know, some shorts ideas, some video concepts. You know, I'm also always writing music at the same time. So I just kind of wanted to talk about what I find most difficult. So I'll start off by saying the easy part for me. The easiest part for me is just coming up with the basic idea. For almost anything. When I sit down with a guitar, I almost have to stop myself from writing. It's one of the hardest things for me is once I have a batch of things that I want to work on, I'm always trying to, you know, my brain's always trying to squeeze more things in, and I kind of have to throttle that back. But that's not the hardest part for me. And the other part that's not hard for me is completion. I'm fine. Once I have something done, I live with it, even if it's not perfect, and I just put it out. I don't overthink. At a certain point, I cross a threshold, but it's in between those two parts that I have my hardest moment, and it's mainly with music. I find that the hardest thing is after I start trying to, you know, I've got parts and pieces, and then I start putting them together and I start roughing out the structure of something. I love that part because it's just like, oh, I could put this here, I could do this 3 times, or I could do it 4 times, or I could do it 5 times. Here's where I get just wrapped up around myself, tied in knots, is when I have to come up with the drum part. Because then it's like, this is it. This is the end. This is the end of the fun part of just mixing and matching and just, you know, playing with things and just kind of jamming it out informally and going, oh, well, I'll just jump to this part this time because I just feel like it, you know. And then all of a sudden, once I codify it and I go, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to end up being the piece of music. I know how long it's going to be. I know where every part is, and I know how many times everything repeats. I have a lot of trouble during that process because I don't want the fun part to end. So, you know, it's different for everybody, but and that may sound like kind of a cop-out answer coming from me, but it really does, you know, it kind of changes the tone of the creative process for me. It goes from being just like splashing colors on everything and just, you know, doodling to becoming like, oh no, this is the deliverable now. This is going to be the deliverable. And then after that, once I get over that hump, then I'm just like, okay, I know what I have to do now. Let's just put all the parts in. Let's make it sound really good, or as best as I can do. And then I'm okay with it. But boy, that center part, that part of just going, okay, this is it. that really is tough for me. And so any comments on that, Kevin, before you talk about what you wrestle with the most?
Well, that's interesting. It was a little bit of a surprise because, you know, you've always been kind of a machine creatively in terms of being, my perception is, you know, just generating a lot of ideas, but also really strong on finishing. You know, you don't leave everything with loose ends and open-ended. You accumulate finished material. And so just the concept of a challenge with the creative process. I knew you must have had a good reason to bring up the topic. So that's not a cop out at all. That gets to the heart of really where we find joy in this process. There's some struggle. Even if things come easily when you first pick up the guitar, that's still work. There's still, you know, some getting into the weeds with that. And then there's the whole prolonged technical process of, okay, finishing the song, planning the recording of the song, you know, doing the recording and the mixing and all that. So there's that little window in the middle that is that sort of fountain of joy where everything is new and fresh and there are infinite possibilities. And so I think what you said really does speak to something universal there, that we're, maybe different people are in it for different reasons, but that little part in the middle, that joy of discovery and that sense of possibility is, in some ways, what it's all about at the end of the day, that keeps that energy connected to us throughout all the stuff around it that we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's my favorite part. My favorite part is, when it's still just a little, it's still fluid, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is going to be carved in stone. So, well, so Kevin, what do you wrestle with the most? I have a guess.
Oh, I think you already know what my answer is, and it goes back, throughout our whole, association, and I think at one point along the way when we were working on an album project, I thought of it in terms of, if Tris had his way, everything would be done on the first take. If I had my way, things would never be done, because because it's kind of an extension of what you said about committing to that finished product. But for me, it's sort of a sense of overwhelm with the possibilities, to the point where any putting a limitation on it almost starts to feel arbitrary. To do another quotable type of thing, I hear a quote bounced around sometimes where a mix is never finished, it's just abandoned. And that's a lot of times how I feel about having to put together a finished song that is final and complete. It's just there's always the potential for more, and it's like, why do I play this part this way? Why do I sing this phrase in this way? Why do I have this part instead of this part? It's easy to just get overwhelmed with the sense of possibility, to the point where it's hard to commit to it, and it almost feels a little arbitrary to commit to something, which is I think a big part of it's funny when we talk about the actual stages of the creative process, that nailing it down and putting a drum bass structure on it, that's actually almost a relief for me when I get to that point, because it shuts off that voice in a way. So it's like a mirror image of yours, but a little bit of a variation, where it's like, once I get to the point where I have a potential structure, it feels liberating to me to have that limitation put on it, because I don't do so well with setting that limitation myself. And that's true throughout the creative process. Like you, if I was just thinking about this the other day, anytime I pick up an instrument, whether it's a guitar, a bass, a mandolin I've got sitting over here, it's like, if I noodle for 30 seconds, I've got a new part. I've got a new viable melody or chord progression or hook or something like that. And so it's more of a fire hose than a faucet. That's the part that
it's a
really
good problem.
Satisfying for me.
It is a good problem to have, though.
Yeah. It's, to me, that's like the joy of the ideas. They're running free. They're loose. They're frolicking. They're not expected to be one particular thing. And then the deliverable is a challenging part for me too. Getting back to what I said about mixes, is I've been working on a song project for a while now. It's pretty protected, but a big part of the effort has been to iron out a lot of these things from the creative process, settle on to a narrow list of tools to work with, a narrow list of parameters to adjust, to kind of create some self-imposed limitations on the creative process. And it's taken me a long time to get through it, but I think I've really worked through a lot of the issues that I have with that, having to set those boundaries, and even boundaries like, how many plugins do I comb through, or new ones do I try to learn how to use in order to make this mix work? It's, where I've started and where I've ended up is radically different. Where I've ended up is 95% of what's in the DAW is just EQ and compression, with a few little flavorings of reverb or chorus or something like that, but very minimal, even that. And it sounds much better than when I started with every available plugin under the sun available to me. So that's the main challenging part for me, is having to pin down those ideas into a finished executable product that seems so full of arbitrary choices that it's hard to justify this being what has to be done for the song. But yeah, similar to you, that stage of the ideas coming forth and seeing them do whatever they want for a while is really the magic that keeps it all going for me. Very
cool. Yeah, it's interesting. your use of the word arbitrary kind of explains, you move slowly and I move fast. I guess the word arbitrary doesn't even come into my brain because I'm just like, no, this is just it. When I can very quickly make a decision, and I commit, almost out of the gate. Like I'm like, oh, that's going to be an acoustic guitar. How do I record an acoustic guitar? I throw up a microphone, and I make sure the guitar sounds great. With electric guitar tones, I try not to. I don't overthink. Now, if something doesn't sound right when I'm recording, I will swap instruments in an instant. But I do it quickly, and I'm just like, oh, well, I know I want a Strat, and I've got 5 Strats behind me. So which one's going to work on this track? And I try not to I spend a lot of time with my pedals and a lot of time with my tones before recording, so that I should just only have to turn them on and off and not have to mess with anything. And that's why I like having, I promise I won't talk about this, but the PTB circuit
Yes.
on board the guitar, if something's not right, I don't have to go in, but the guitar is overall almost there. I can use those tone controls under my hands and on the fly rather than start fiddling with knobs on my pedal board or on my amp, because that's suicide right there. All of a sudden, it's like you can be in the weeds in 2 seconds.
And
so yeah, I think that what I do is that I don't think about it as being arbitrary. I just have I'm really I know what I think is wrong, and I know what I think is right, and then I just I just don't overthink. I try not to. I do all my overthinking outside of the creative process, because I will sit around and I think about things all, like when I'm just doing mundane things and stuff like that. And I feel like that's where a lot of my weeding out process happens, where it's like, oh, well, I'll use a Les Paul on that instead of a Strat, and I think I'll get a better result, or just things like that. But but when I'm actually like roll up my sleeves and I'm in the trenches, at that point, it's like, it's too late. I only have X amount of time, and I have to get X amount done. So it's just going to be what it's going to be, and that's arbitrary, I guess, in and of itself. But I'm not paying for studio time, but I still act like I am, because my time. My time is the thing that I have the least of,
Well,
so.
I think you have to do that, and maybe to some extent even more so when in setups where people are more digital, like I am, where there's even less of an outside reason or an outside limiting factor in what I'm doing, so I can make things more arbitrary than they need to be. But when I was out, we did the studio tour at your space last year, and breaking down the whole process and how the pieces fit together. I really took that to heart and kind of brought that ethos back here to try to iron out what that creative process would be, the technical process, and to create more of an intentionality about it, so that every single choice along the way doesn't have infinite possibilities. And this is the guitar I'm going to use for this. I just know that, and I'm going to make it work. And this is the bass I'm going to use for that. And even if little unexpected things happen along the way, having that degree of intentionality going into the process simplifies things incredibly.
Yes.
And so that's an example I took from your process, which there are other videos on the channel as well. People dig back a little bit into every aspect of the recording process you've undertaken and how you go about it. And, if you're all digital and you have no inherent limitations, impose them on yourself, create yourself some structure. So that the joyful part we talked about is really where the energy can go, not combing through 1,000 variations of the same plugin to see which one is going to be the one to do the job.
Agreed, completely. All right. Well, I think that we've covered what we wanted to cover, but now I appeal to you. If you have anything that you want to put into the comments about, the difficulties of the creative process. Kevin and I are both like, I remember reading this quote not too long ago by Stuart Copeland. Stuart Copeland's like, I've never had any problem writing a song. He's like, I could write 10 songs a day, and some people are like that. I'm like that. And I know that to a certain degree, you're like that too. Maybe not as, voluminous as I am or as prodigious, But that idea that you just sit down and you have an idea within 30 seconds, I think a lot of people struggle with that front end. So I'd love to hear about that more, because that's something that has always come easy to me. And I hope that doesn't off-put people going, oh, and a lot of my songs are not that, I've written hundreds of songs and not all of them are great, so you have to comb through it. And that's what Stuart Copeland said as well. But I always loved that he was like, there's never a shortage of ideas in my camp. It's just sometimes the execution just isn't that good and nobody likes what I do. He's kind of talking about his Clark Kent era, that was happening simultaneously with the rise of the police, and stuff like that. His little punk ditties and things. So anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, drop something in the comments about how you struggle with the creative process. And please hit that subscribe button. Likes and shares are greatly appreciated. And we'll see you next time. Take care.